to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us today. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to live a high-impact life. Now, here's Rick.
Welcome to the Point of Impact podcast. I'm Rick McDaniel. It's great to have you joining us again today. And today we kick off our focus on regrets. Now, last week there was an episode. It was actually a message that I spoke at a church on breaking free from regret. So technically, I suppose we started last week, but this week is where we're really going to get into the 5 greatest regrets that people have, the big 5. And we'll spend a week, an episode on each of those 5 and try to really, drill down, try to have a greater understanding of what regret is all about. And of course, most importantly, the whole purpose of this is that we could end up living our lives without those regrets, so that when we come to the end of our life, we won't have these top regrets that people had. We'll get into that in just a moment, but before we do, a couple of things. One thing is, on Monday, on Columbus Day, I had a new article come out on Fox News Digital, foxnews.com, and it was about how on Columbus Day, be inspired to discover the courage that you need to really take advantage of opportunities and reach your full potential and seize those opportunities. And I used the example of Columbus, having visited where Columbus actually launched his journey in a place called Huelva, Spain, near the Portugal border. And so I hope that you will read it. It is a very inspirational piece about having the courage, about discovering the courage, and most importantly, of course, practicing it, actually becoming more courageous. And I'm excited about the impact that it has had, and I can't wait for you to read it. So if you haven't read it yet, just go on to foxnews.com, click like opinion, and you can find it if you scroll down. But really, the easiest thing is to just type in my name, because I have an entire page on Fox that is dedicated to all my articles, and almost always the current article is at the top. So if you just typed in Rick McDaniel, comes up, and right there at the top it should have this article about Columbus Day and having courage. But hope you'll read it, and more importantly, of course, I hope you'll put it into practice. And even some of the things that we're talking about today, frankly, are directly related to this idea of courage and taking risks. So you'll see the connection. So it'd be a great article, listen to this episode, read the article, listen to the episode, whatever. It'll do you a world of good to be able to do that. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. Also, this new book just came out on Wednesday, Maverick Leadership, that I have a chapter in. So I didn't write the whole book. It's a compilation of a number of leadership practitioners. But if you are interested in leadership at all, and really, of course, I say many times that many people are in leadership positions. They may not be formal, you may not have a title, but you are practicing leadership, because leadership is influence. And so wherever you are having influence, you are leading, and that can be in the home, in the school, on a team, at work, in the community, amongst your friend group, all over the place. And the chapter is entitled Inspirational Leadership, and you might want to take advantage of that, because it really will help you to understand how you can become a more inspiring leader. But there's chapters from a number of men that have served in the military. Many went to West Point, and there are chapters from some very successful business people giving their perspective. So there's some great folks that you could learn a lot from on a variety of topics. I mean, that's what's kind of neat about a book like that. It's got a lot of different contributions. So Maverick Leadership came out on Wednesday. All right, let's jump into this. So the genesis for all this is that about 20 years ago, I read this article from this woman in Australia. Bronnie Ware was her name, and she was a palliative nurse, which is the the nurses that work with people who are dying. And so she wrote a piece that essentially summarized her experience working with dying people, about the regrets of the top 5 regrets of the dying. And then that became so popular that a publisher came to her, and then several years later in 2011, the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, came out. So what started out as simply an article became an entire book. Now, I will be clear with you. I actually never read the book. I just read the article years ago, and I just saved it, and that just got me thinking about this whole subject, as I think it is obviously fascinating. Another time I did something on people who live to be 100, which is another fascinating study. What do people have to say who live to be 100? It's worth knowing. And here, what do people say who are dying? So we're going to spend each episode on one of the 5 regrets over the next 5 weeks. So this first one I would summarize as having courage to be yourself. That would be it. The entire line would go, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. So I'm going to just trim it down to having courage to be yourself. And what I thought was interesting about this particular one is that, and why we are starting with it, by the way, is that unfulfilled wishes were the most common regret amongst her patients. So number 1, at the very top of the list, the very biggest regret, unfulfilled wishes. In other words, things that I wish I had done that I didn't. Now, Cornell University did a big study on regrets, and I've written about this before, and I'm just going to summarize just the very ending of it. There's ideal self, true self. There's a lot to it. But in the end, what they basically said is that short-term, people regret things they did, wish they hadn't done them. But long-term, like at the end of your life, people regret the things they didn't do more than the things they did. And that's really what this is about today. About the idea that you can end up regretting more what you didn't do than what you actually did. And that's something I think it's a little curious, because I think many times we do focus on the things we wish we hadn't done, but the truth is it's the things we wish we had done. Bronnie Ware really nailed this, and again said, this is, of all of them, this is the top one. As people approach death, they gained like phenomenal clarity about life. Unfortunately, again, they're at the end of the life when they get this clarity. So we can benefit from their wisdom. We can take what they learned at the end of their life and apply it to live our lives differently right now. And this first regret is that people didn't have the courage. There it is. See, the courage. That's why the article that I just wrote, which is not connected to regret, but it's just so perfect the way they go together, in the sense that Columbus Day just happened to fall in line. I wish I could say I planned it all this way so perfectly. I didn't, but it does work out pretty beautifully. The courage to live true to themselves, the courage to unfulfilled. Again, that's the phrase, unfulfilled wishes. This is the most common regret. I wish I had had the courage to do what I wanted to do, what I felt I should do. I wish I'd had that courage. All right. So here's the good news. You can be true to yourself. Yeah. God's created you with a unique purpose, a unique destiny. You're one of a kind. God has a plan and a purpose for your life that's unique from all the other 8 billion people on this earth. He has a plan for your life, but you have to, again, be true to it and have the courage to do it. Jesus is a marvelous example of the courage to be true to his destiny. I mean, and again, this destiny involved dying a horrific death. That is not going to likely be the destiny that we will have, but he was willing to do it and to be true to his plan and his destiny. Along the way, he loved the unlovable, reached out to all kinds of people, lepers, people no one wanted to be around, tax collectors, the outcast, the woman at the well who had committed adultery and was actually in an adulterous relationship at the time. And the tax collector was like a traitor because he was collecting taxes for Rome and from his own people. I mean, Jesus reached out to people that were paralyzed, even one man that was like completely demon possessed and just like a complete zombie. He was willing to do that. He had the courage to do it, and even entrusted the future of everything he's started, the church, to 11 people, to 11 guys. Because the 12th guy bailed on him, Judas, so all he had was 11 guys. I mean, that's kind of wild, right? He spoke the truth even though people would get mad at him for it. One time, the Bible tells a story about how they got so mad at him and that he was right by a cliff and they tried to throw him off a cliff or wanted to. The Bible never gives this. I'd love to know, how did Jesus get out of that predicament? You got a crowded people, the cliff's right there. How did you manage to get out of that? That would be a great story to know. Get to heaven one day and say, hey, Jesus, how'd you get out of that jam? That's a pretty tough one. The point, though, is that he did what had to be done in order for humanity to have the opportunity to be forgiven of our past mistakes, failures, sins, as the Bible would call them, that separate us from God. So he's a marvelous example for us of what it means to really be true to yourself and to live out a life that is in keeping with your purpose and your destiny, even if that is hard to do. And it is hard to do. And it obviously involves a great degree of courage and risk-taking and all of those sorts of things. But we have to do it. We have to be willing to do it, to be true to ourselves. I read this one time in one of these, Dear Abby columns. I've been unhappy in my marriage for a long time, so long, in fact, that started long before it became a marriage. But I always had an excuse for putting off ending the relationship. In the beginning, it was like, well, I'll wait until after summer, and then I'll wait until after the holidays, and then it never happened. And then it was like, well, I can't do it now. There's a wedding that's already been planned, and I can't disappoint family and friends. In 8 years, 2 children later, I'm still in the same place. And I can just tell you, as the father of a son who called off a wedding 1 week before, 1 week before it was to happen. And I can tell you that is not an easy thing to do. But to marry the wrong person is a much worse thing to do. My son had been in Afghanistan for a year. The engagement had happened previous to Afghanistan and maybe a little bit rushed because of all that involved and leaving for war and all those things. And then comes back and just really realizes, this isn't what I want to do. And man, I remember him coming downstairs. It was on a Saturday morning. I was downstairs and early, no one else was up, and my son came downstairs and he's like, Dad, I need to talk to you about something. And he laid it on me. So there it is. It takes courage to do these sorts of things, but sometimes you have to be able to have the courage to do it. A lot about having this particular regret, of unfulfilled wishes, and is really just the the ability to say, I'm going to make the move. I'm going to make the change. Not could I, should I, would I, might I, but I'm going to. Like I'm going to do it. I'm not going to talk about doing it. I'm going to actually do it. And the thing about regret is, if you don't do that, you will end up regretting it later. And maybe you listen to this podcast all the time. Maybe you stumbled upon it for the first time. And you're like, wow, I just can't believe we're talking about this subject. Or I'm like right here in this exact scenario. Yeah. My belief would be that God directed you this way. That's how I see it. I wouldn't call it an accident. I wouldn't call it luck. I would coincidence. I'd say, hey, God's trying to get your attention to say like, hey, you got to do something here. Change stems from dissatisfaction. Firstly. Secondly, I'd say it requires insight. And then I would say it takes energy. You got to put the effort in. All of which, by the way, are very doable. I mean, it stems from your dissatisfaction, your unfulfilled wishes. This isn't the way you want to be living or what you want to be doing. And then you just need the insight to say, I don't want to live with regrets. And then this is what I'm going to do about it. This is the change that I'm going to, like people who just complain about their job. Your job's the biggest amount of time you spend doing anything in life. Why would you day after day, week after week, month after month, or even year after year, just like be miserable or complain about it? Do something different. Do what it is that you want to do. Here's a great story for you. Luciano Pavarotti, now, very famous opera singer, right? So growing up, his mom wanted him to be a banker, but he ended up becoming a school teacher and sang infrequently. But his dad, just kept on him and said, like, you're living below your potential. So then he made this change so he wouldn't live with regret. And he stopped teaching, but he still had to make money somehow. So he chose to sell insurance because insurance gave him more flexible time than a teaching job to develop his vocal talent. So he started studying voice, and these are his words, "This was the turning point of my life." Here's what he said: "It's a mistake to take the safe path in life. It's a mistake to take the safe path in life. If I hadn't listened to my father and dropped teaching, I never would have become this famous opera singer." No, not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So you'll have to do something like change jobs or whatever. Again, whatever it is that we're talking about that you need to change. Now, I will tell you that one thing about change is the way it, kind of becomes a threat to other people around you. So you'll have to deal with that, you'll have to deal with other people's potential unhappiness with you or pushback or criticism or whatever it is. You're going to give up this job and you're just, that's just a pipe dream. And I mean, it might be a pipe dream, but pipe dreams come true. What we know for certain might not come true, might come true. Here's what we know for certain. If you don't, you're going to get to the end of your life with this regret. I wish I'd had the courage, to be myself, to be who I believe God created me to be, to become a mother or to become a singer or to become an athlete or to become a teacher, or to start your own business, own your own business, whatever it might be. There's no way that this happens without risk. I just want to be frank with you. I don't want to just say, hey, have the courage to, make the change you need to make in your life. Hey, good luck. End of episode. No, not the end of the episode. Stimulation or security. Progress or perfection. Ambiguity or predictability. I mean, you got to choose. You got to choose. Ambiguity is different than predictability, and stimulation is different than security, and progress is different than perfection. But, if you want everything to just be solid, predictable, safe, secure, the same, you could very well end up with regret in your life. But if you'll allow yourself to live with some of the ambiguity, the dynamic tension, and live with the stimulation, that very exciting, but obviously not safe and secure, if you'll pursue the progress instead of just, expecting everything to be perfect. Along the way toward taking risks, there'll be ups and downs, there'll be falls, but there'll also be, of course, marvelous successes. I mean, here's a question for you. Would you rather feel intense disappointment, which, by the way, is temporary, or intense regret, which is permanent? And that's really what you have to ask yourself. Which would you rather feel? Well, when you say it that way, Rick, I'll certainly take disappointment over regret any day. Absolutely. That's why I'm couching it that way. I'm being upfront with you. I'm not saying no disappointment. I'm not saying easy peasy, it's a breeze. But there'll be some disappointments. Been through one myself here. I get it. But it's better than regret. Coming to the end of your life and being like, oh, if only. If we go back to, we were talking about Jesus earlier, he took risks to love the unlovable, to serve people, and ultimately to die, to offer himself as a sacrifice. So risk costs you. I mean, it does. It does cost you. And again, I want to be totally transparent today because I don't want you to go, oh yeah, I need to really start living without regrets. So, I need to have the courage to be true to, myself, and I don't want to live with unfulfilled wishes. Okay, and let's just look at the cost, okay? Because the two major currencies are involved, time and money. I mean, it's going to cost you time and it's going to cost you money. And I'm going to throw in energy as well, because I really do think the energy effort quotient is there as well. So you got to be willing to put forth the effort to have the kind of energy. You've got to be willing to, potentially many times in terms of the time issue, people have to say, keep their same job while they're pursuing, again, like Pavarotti, he's selling insurance, but also studying voice. Lots of times you've got to keep doing the thing you are doing while you're preparing for what you ultimately want to do. And there's no doubt that there'll be money sacrifices that have to be made. But again, some people, of course, would say to you, well, worth it, because now I have more money and resources than I ever would have had before because I chose to pursue my dream. Now, you do need to strategize before you take the risk, not after, before there's a dream, right? That's where it starts. And then the dream leads to a goal. And then the goal leads to a strategy. And then the strategy leads to execution. It always works this way. So it's not just enough to have a dream or even let that result in a goal. There has to be a strategy for how that goal is going to be accomplished, which will definitely involve risk and courage, but you have to have one. And then ultimately you have to execute it. You got to do it. You got to put it into practice, whatever it will be. And there will be challenges, right? There will be challenges. There will be the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And just remember, when you do 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you just went forward 1 step. mean, people use that phrase in a kind of a pejorative way, like this is really kind of negative. I mean, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. No, it's just 1 step forward. 2 minus 1 is 1. So life will be that way. Pursuing a dream, a goal, a wish, it will involve some backwards, but the forward will be greater than the backward. And that's all you need. Lee Iacocca once said, you're never going to get what you want out of life without taking some risks. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, the fact of the matter is that life is filled with risk. Good housekeeping, and this is old. These numbers are not current. This is an older information. So I'm sure it's updated, but 1 in 10 chance you'll have an auto accident. I'm sure it's higher than that now. Probably closer to 1 in 2. 1 in 15 chance you'll die. 1 in 2,900 chance you'll die in an auto accident. So having an accident and dying are 2 very different things. 1 in 80,000 chance you'll die from complications of surgery. 1 in 250,000 that you would die in an airplane crash, which, by the way, ought to give you some, those of you that have a little fear of flying, I mean, just 2,900 to 1 versus 250,000 to 1 car accident death versus a plane crash death. So, it ought to help you a little bit, and just take it from a guy who's on a lot of airplanes, just flew in on this week, Monday. So from a weekend of speaking and doing things. So planes are pretty safe. The point is that you can never take risks completely out of life. I would also say that, it takes risks to leave the home that we're raised in. It takes risks to get married. It takes risks to move to a new part of the country. It takes risks to buy a home in the hopes that you can pay for it. It takes risks, certainly, to start a business. I mean, I don't know how you get out of these things in life. You don't. It's about managing that risk. And I would say it's about being careful who you listen to. Don't listen to the wrong people. Now, again, some people want to give you advice about the risk, and you should listen to that. But some people, the whole point of them giving you their advice is because they're trying to talk you out of it. They don't want you to do it. Don't think you should do it. And you got to discern, are they here to just, give me some heads up, like watch this, watch that, don't get sidetracked or derailed or end up crashing because you didn't know this was possible, versus the people that are really just trying to take those things to use them to discourage you. Because in the end, they won't be around, when you're on your deathbed and you're at the end of your life, you're the one that's going to be reflecting on your life and your regrets. When you're true to yourself, when you say, I have these wishes, these dreams, these desires, and then you just pursue it. You pursue that, say, God-given destiny. It sounds like a big word, but another way to say it is that you pursue your potential. You want to live out your full potential. When you do that, then you won't have regret. I'm not saying you'll come to the end of your life and say, everything went just the way I wanted. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you won't have regrets about trying, about attempting. Maybe things didn't always work out, but at least you tried. You won't be there. Like, again, number one regret of people, of the 5 we'll talk about, this is the number one, is just unfulfilled wishes. Did not pursue it. So pursue it. Have the courage. Take the risk. Don't live your life with regret. All right, have a great week. We'll continue this next week.
You've been listening to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode.